Reasonably quick. Mr. Clark, I wanted to talk about digital spectrum, particularly as it regards with community television broadcasts. So, just to spell out, what I'd like to have by the end of this brief session is an idea of why the government seems so keen to take the community TV broadcasters off the air by the end of the year. Nobody seems to understand exactly why that is occurring. Maybe I'll just start with that as a simple question. What is the imperative behind knocking the community television stations off the air by the end of this year? And then I'll get down to a couple more detailed questions.
Nerita O'Loughlin, Deputy Secretary. Senator, the Minister, in looking at the future of community television, did quite a bit of work looking at their current audiences, the restrictive nature of their broadcasting licences they stand, which limit the amount of revenue that they can raise from sponsorship, and looked at what the future of community broadcasting would be. The figures for community broadcasting have fallen significantly over recent years to a point where now primetime audiences across the 5 community stations are around 7,000 people in total. And the Minister's view was that that sort of niche service would be better delivered via the internet, which also removes the restrictive nature of the advertising pressures on the community television sector. So in thinking about that, the Minister also looked at the fact that the broadcasters are currently using spectrum aligned with the 6th channel spectrum, and as part of the spectrum review, we wanted to look at what could be the potential future uses of that 6th channel spectrum. And given that it's the last big block of spectrum available nationally, the spectrum review is going to look at that in the longer term, whether or not, for example, that could be replanned for LTE mobile services over time as demand increases for those sorts of services, but as a longer term planning process. But also in the meantime, there is some pressure for the commercial broadcasters to start trialling new digital technologies, DVB-T2 and HEVC, which are new compression standards allowing for greater amounts of, say, HD viewing or channels provided off the existing spectrum. Yeah. So the view was taken that the government wanted to assist the community broadcasters to move from being delivered over spectrum to online delivery. You're assisting them out of business. They don't feel assisted. So maybe let's take that word out of our vocabulary. They are not feeling assisted, they are feeling closed down. Senator, the government's provided $450,000 to help the community broadcasters think through what their future is. They have. All right, let's come back to that. Yep. One of the factors that you didn't mention was budget. Is it correct that the existence of the community TV broadcasters has no financial impact, apart from what you might get from auctioning off their spectrum, which I'll come to in a second? They don't actually draw funds from Commonwealth taxpayers, do they? They're self-funded.
In the past, the community broadcasters, television broadcasters, have received some funding from the Community Broadcasting Foundation for content.
But not at present.
But not for, we did also assist them to convert to digital.
That's right.
So some funding was provided by the government to convert to digital, and we also assisted them to retune under the recent restack. Yeah, good, okay. But there's no present budget appropriation for them?
No, Senator, similarly, there's no charge for spectrum for community broadcasters.
I just want to get clear, because you didn't mention it, which is fine. I just want to get clear that there's not a budget imperative to close them down. It relates to the other Senator. Issues. No. Good, okay, that's the first thing. Tell us, if you could, how are trials of the MPEG-4 compression standard on the vacant 6th channel progressing, and what's the timeline for that rollout?
Senator, that was raised in the spectrum review when that review went out for consultation. And some of the responses back from the commercial broadcasters in particular were interested in looking at the next generation of compression technology and transmission technology rather than MPEG-4, which is sort of a bit here and now. So we are in discussions, and we've been having discussions, preliminary discussions to be fair, with the ACMA about what would be the available spectrum if the broadcasters wanted to start those trials over the next 12 to 18 months.
All right, good. And just to be clear, trialling these new compression standards is about squeezing more channels or more data down the same amount of spectrum?
Same amount of spectrum, yes.
Yeah, great. You've presumably, you've referred there to some expressions of interest in the 6th channel. Are you interested in setting up perhaps a trial planning group open to all stakeholders rather than just the commercial broadcasters?
I don't think we've turned our mind to that.
All right, well, there's an idea that we heard first at estimates then. Can I leave that one with you?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Now, the community broadcasters in the metro areas occupy UHF, not VHF 6th channel spectrum in the metro areas in which they operate. And it would be presumably the main VHF spectrum required in the first instance for these trials. So I'm struggling to understand how the conversation that we're having about those trials, why that should actually impact the community broadcasters at all, because they're actually not occupying that spectrum.
Senator, in terms of the spectrum, and this is the discussions we've been having with the ACMA, you're correct, it's UHF, but of course various spectrum is used by different transmitters across certain areas.
Yeah.
And that, for example, for a trial in Sydney to be undertaken, you would have to allocate spectrum across a broad range of different areas in VHF, and the concern is that the spectrum occupied by the community broadcasters currently would interfere with that other spectrum.
Could I, when you say concerns expressed or whatever language you put to us, that to me feels actually kind of vague. Could you provide us any evidence that that's actually a material concern? Because
yeah, Senator, I might ask Dr. Pelling, but certainly,
as you wish.
Not being an engineer, I'd be happy to provide the detail that we've been provided by the ACMA.
That's great.
On notice to you.
I'm not an engineer either, so I'm happy for the rest of the conversation to proceed in plain English.
Yes.
And the way that it's been expressed to me is that the community broadcasters could happily continue alongside any trials, because they're actually not going to be in a position where they're interfering.
And that's not our advice, Senator.
All right. Dr. Pelling, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, we are, I think we're still working through the detail with the ACMA, but if I can sort of summarise, essentially the available channels, for example, for a commercial broadcaster, if you take Sydney, requires them to broadcast on VHF in the high-powered services, and there would be a number of translators on UHF which would provide infill. For example, 2 locations in Sydney where there are translators are in the King's Cross and Manly area.
But that's for an actual service,
and
that is
where, well, I think fundamentally it depends on what the trial encompasses. So if, for example, you wish to trial the operation of the DVB-T2 system on multiple transmitters at the same time,
yep.
Then you would need access to provide on different transmitters. If, for example, you wish to include in the trial some sensitivities around audience reception and so on, you'd want to deal with an adequate level of coverage.
Now, normally in estimates committee hearings, we're advised to stay the hell away from hypotheticals. That sounds extraordinarily hypothetical to me. Are there any concrete proposals for such trials, such that you would need to get community broadcasters out of the way?
We're in discussions with the commercial broadcasters and they're preparing proposals at the moment.
I have spoken to the commercial broadcasters on precisely this issue. I'm not going to name anyone or verbal anyone, but I've been assured that they are not behind the push to get CTV off air.
Senator, if I can go back to my opening comments, the decisions around community television are not solely driven by the freeing up of that spectrum.
That's good to know.
They are driven by a view of the government that the future for community broadcasting as a niche service at a time where Australians are taking up online services in droves is for them to move online,
right,
where they are not restricted by the issues that the licence conditions that restrict them from, for example, raising advertising revenue.
Yeah.
That is a stronger business case for them in the longer term.
Okay, hold that thought.
And Senator,
yeah,
just on that point, going online makes the services available to a wider range of Australians. At the moment, as you know, they broadcast in particular.
You're going to put them out of business, Senator Fifield. Can you imagine if Mr Turnbull called Kerry Stokes into his office and said, "You guys are doing great on Channel 7. We want you to move online. It's got a big future." It would be ridiculous. You wouldn't even entertain such a conversation.
Senator,
and yet you're telling the community broadcasters that they have to go and take their chances on YouTube.
Senator, if I could just make...
it opens wider access to a wider range of Australians.
You're going to put them out of business,
cities.
Senator Fifield. I don't know how to put it any more plainly. Do you understand that they are very strongly resisting this opportunity that you're putting to them because it will put them out of business?
Anyway, the government is a big supporter of community broadcasters.
You are so supportive that you're going to send them to the wall.
Well, I was a big fan over the years of Josie Pirelli's chart-busting 80s on Channel 31.
Great.
And No Limits, good programs, and there's every reason why they should continue online, being accessible to more people.
They are, my understanding, and I'm not actually here to speak for them, is that everybody in that sector agrees that online is the future, but if you try and send them online by the end of this year and rip their spectrum off them, you'll put them out of business. They're not ready.
Senator, and that's the point that's been put to the government, that community broadcasting sees its future as being online.
Not this December.
And they have put that view to the government, and that would be a matter for the minister to consider any extension.
It's good. Okay, that's the first use of that word so far this morning, so that is good. It's not about the budget. It's not about them needing to be automatically out of the way of spectrum trials by other players. So that's two things that we've crossed off.
Senator, if I can just...
yeah, go ahead.
If I can just... Going back to your point about Channel 7, our recent analysis of 2014 was the highest primetime viewing of any of those community television stations was 2,000 people. And with 346,000 television reach across a week compared to 5.3 million for Channel 7.
That's why Mr Stokes hasn't been called in for a similar meeting. So if it's about audience reach, it's not about spectrum, it's not about the budget, it's about audience reach, then let's come to that. Their BSA conditions explicitly do not require them to go chasing ratings, chasing audiences. They are about diversity, they're about extent of reach, they're about training. I mean, Senator Fifield, you'd be aware of this. You've been in and around the sector probably for as long as anybody. They are an extraordinarily important training ground for people, and they do reach large niche audiences. So the figures that I have, they have a larger audience than NITV in the capital cities collectively and in the capitals, and reach 3 million Australians a month. So we could cherry pick a particular time slot and point to a small audience. But it seems to me that if they want to continue, if they are serving niche audiences, it's not costing the taxpayer $1 and nobody needs that spectrum yet. It seems a bit bloody-minded to just push them off the air before they're ready. I guess that's a statement rather than a question, isn't it? But does anybody want to contest any of those points? Because I don't understand why you're doing this, to be honest.
I think there's a fabulous opportunity for these services to be available to a wider range of people than those who happen to be in the capital cities.
Give them 3 years, Senator Fifield. You can't pull their spectrum in December. You will actually send them to the wall. I don't know how to be any more clear.
Well, Senator, that's why we've been working with the community broadcasters for them to develop a business case to deliver, to understand why they can't move by the end of the year. And we're still waiting for those business cases to come to us. So,
okay,
once we get those,
talk us through that process a bit.
Well, as I said, we provided the Community Broadcasting Foundation set aside money to assist the community broadcasters to develop business cases
for online delivery.
For the move to online.
For the shift. Yep.
For the shift, recognising, as you said, they do see that as their future. So we are waiting for those business cases to come back to fully understand what are the impediments for them to move by the end of this year. We've seen statements, but we've not seen details.
The business case is okay.
Well, I would just emphasise that it's not. We haven't requested those. They have proposed that they give them to us. So they have not yet accessed the money which we made available.
I'm not sure
to the best of my knowledge.
Be in a position, and again, I don't think I should speak for them, and I don't know the inside financials. And as I think you've indicated as well, there's a quite wide diversity of audience reach and capacity around the country. Some of the stations are struggling, some of them appear to be actually doing very well.
And that's been a feature of community television. It has. Unlike community radio, which I'd have to say has always been very vibrant.
I just think it's harder and probably quite a bit more costly to run a TV broadcaster than it is to run a radio broadcaster.
Absolutely. And that's why they've always struggled. Yeah,
but they haven't all struggled. Having visited the Melbourne studios fairly recently.
Melbourne's always been very strong, and it's been the longest standing service. But again, Melbourne also sees their future over time as being online.
Just not this December. I don't want to have a disagreement with you about the importance of online.
No, but Senator, as I said, we've seen statements, but we've not seen the details, and we would be very willing to look at those details and see if they can be assisted.
Okay. That is a little spark of optimism that you've left us with, and I greatly appreciate it. If that's not a process that you've called for a business case by a particular time, there's no deadline set, then you're just awaiting that information from
We would like that information. Well, the decision currently stands that their licences will end in December.
Yeah.
So we would think that getting business cases to us early for us to consider would be timely.
Sooner the better. Well, they've got to wind up lease arrangements, staff entitlements, redundancies.
Yes, we understand that.
You'd see them pulled presumably well before December, if that's the cut-off. But if you're indicating here, I know you can't speak directly for the Minister, but Senator Fifield, feel free to jump in if you want to, that at least the department's mind isn't closed to an extension of time if they can make the case.
No, Senator, at this point in time the decision is the end of the year. That wouldn't be a department decision, that would be up to the Minister.
Right.
But what we're waiting for is the detailed information from the community broadcasters to understand their claims that they make publicly that they can't transition by the end of this year.
Okay. Senator Fifield, you've been paying close attention, I think, to this conversation thus far. Could you make an undertaking, are you in a position to make an undertaking on behalf of the Minister that perhaps his mind isn't completely closed and you'd be willing to consider the evidence if it looks like you're going to be sending these broadcasters to the wall rather than a seamless transition by December?
I don't think I can take it any further than Ms O'Loughlin has. There is a process.
Well, Ms O'Loughlin doesn't speak for the executive.
No, she doesn't, but she's outlined quite correctly that there is a process. And that the department is awaiting the advice of the sector as to what they see as the issues in meeting the timeframes which the government has determined.
Are you able to make any undertakings on behalf of the Minister, though, that he would at least consider a change of view if... Let's assume good faith here that Minister Turnbull didn't intend to send these broadcasters off a cliff at the end of the year, that he's actually looking for a seamless transition. Is that your understanding of...
Well, he as am I, and everyone at this table are big supporters of community broadcasting, radio and TV.
That's very cheerful news. That being the case, then, is the Minister, do you think, of an open mind to consider an extension of time if December appears to be too soon?
Well, there is a process, and we're awaiting further advice, or the department's awaiting further advice from the sector as to what they see as the issues in the transition. But at the moment, we have a process, we have a timeline, and that's what we're working to. But I can't take things any further than that.
Senator Fifield, you've spoken a bit about it. What is the process? There's no process. You're going to switch them off. Well, just tell us what the process is.
Ms O'Loughlin has outlined that the sector has the opportunity to provide advice to the department about what they see as the issues.
Let's hope common sense prevails. Thanks all. Thank you, Chair.